Welcome back. As we said in the introduction, we have billed for that usage of Serverless SQL Pool per query. So it's important to understand how that works and how to control the cost. When we say we have billed for the data processed, it includes a few things rather than just the size of the files. It includes the amount of data read from the storage. The data read from the storage will be dependent on the query that you're writing and the format of the files. For example, if you partitioned your data and the query required only certain partitions to be read, Serverless SQL will only read those partitions and you are only charged for that amount of data. Instead, if the data is not partitioned, it may have to read all of the data every time. Similarly, doing column-level aggregation in a Parquet file will read fewer data compared to delimited files such as CSV. That's because Parquet is a columnar file format. Some of the file formats, such as Parquet and Delta Lake, also contains metadata. So the amount of metadata read will also be included for billing. Secondly, some queries will require the data to be transferred amongst compute nodes as part of the query execution. This data will also be included for billing. Finally, we can use create external table statements to write out the data to storage using Serverless SQL. That will also be considered as part of the data processed. So it's these three components which make up the total amount of data processed. Data processed doesn't include server-level metadata such as logins and also execution of DDL statements such as create database, create schema, etc. The calculated data processed from this step will be rounded to the nearest megabits. Also, there's a minimum of 10 megabytes charged per query. So if your files are only a few kilobytes, even then you will be charged for 10 megabits. At the time of recording, we are charged $5 in US dollars per 1 terabytes of data processed. You can check the documentation for the charges in your local currency. I'll take you through that in a few minutes. Also, the Synapse Studio provides an user interface as shown here to set cost control so that we don't exceed the budget for our team and also not being charged unknowingly. The same can be achieved by using T-SQL commands too. Let's switch over to the Synapse Studio and I'll show you how to apply these cost controls. I'll also show you the pricing portal where you can see the cost of using Serverless SQL Pool in your local currency. Let's get started. Okay. Here we are in our Synapse Studio. Click on Manage and click on SQL Pools and that'll list all the SQL pools available in our workspace. In this workspace, we only have serverless pools. We haven't created any dedicated pools. That's why we're seeing the only serverless pool available. In order to set cost control, hover your mouse over built-in and then you'll see these icons popping up here and click on that icon and that'll give you a cost control. If you're not seeing that icon, you can click on the three dots here and then underneath you will get the cost control icon again. It opens up the dialog box on the right here and that's got two sections. One is it's telling you the data processed. So how much data has been processed by this workspace today, this week, and this month? And also it gives you the ability to put controls or put limits on the amount of data the workspace is allowed to process. And as you can see here, I haven't processed any data today or this week. But I did record the introduction video last week, which is part of this month, and I ran a few queries. I think it's 3. So I've got 30 megabits processed for this month. But in case I wanted to make sure that I don't go over 1 terabyte in a day or a week or a month, I can just come over here and put the limits. In order to set a daily limit, click on Enabled and then that lets you edit this box here. So you can say I want to limit the usage for a day to 1 terabyte, and if the amount of data processed exceeds 1 terabytes, then the further queries won't run, so they'll stop. You may be wondering actually, when does the day start and finish, because it's on the cloud. The day limit is from 00 UTC Universal Time to 23:59. So that's the time. It's not your local time zone, it is on UTC, so remember that. And for the weekly limit, again it starts from Monday, goes up to Sunday. So let's set a limit for our week as well. I'm going to set that to 1 as well. So my workspace will allow for 1 terabytes of data to be processed in a day as well as in a week. So if within a day or a week, if you exceed more than 1, then it's going to stop you running any further queries. And while we're here, let's say, set the monthly limit as well. I'm going to click on Enabled and then I'm going to say I want to be able to process up to 2 terabytes of data and then we'll stop after that. So now that's been done, and in order to save the settings, click on Apply, and from now they come into effect. So if a query is running while exceeds at 1 terabyte, that's okay, let the query finish, but no further queries will be able to run in this workspace. Now that we've implemented the cost control via the user interface, let's try and do that via the T-SQL script. In order to do that, go over to Develop and then start a new SQL script, and you can do everything you did on the UI using T-SQL as well. So including seeing how much data we processed, if you remember on the UI, the first thing we saw was the amount of data processed per day, per week, and per month. So we can get that information from one of the systables using T-SQL. Let's do that first. So the table sys_admin external data processed will give you that information, and as you can see, daily we've had 0 megabytes and weekly 0 as well as monthly 10 megabytes data I processed. So that's the information you're seeing here. And the next thing we saw was the current settings for the daily, weekly, and monthly limits. So you can again get that from sysconfigurations. So let's query that sysconfigurations table. So let me run this query. So within Synapse Studio, if you have multiple queries, and if you don't select and run, it'll run both queries. So let me do that. As you can see, we got 2 queries being run, and the results of both of them are here. But we don't always want to do that. So in order to run only one of the queries, you just select that select statement. Highlight the select statement there and then just click on Run. That will just that query, and that's what's happened. And as you can see here, we got 3 records. So that's the daily limit in terabytes and weekly and monthly limits in terabytes. It's 1, 1, and 2. That's what we set. So the last thing we did in the UI is to set the limits. So there is a stored procedure called the sp_setDataProcessed_limit. You can invoke that procedure and then pass in the parameters that daily, monthly, or weekly, and also the limits in terabytes, and it'll set the values for us. So let me show you how to do that. Let's invoke the stored procedure first. So we're invoking the stored procedure here, and the type is being set to monthly. So it's going to set the value for monthly and the limit_TB parameter being set to 4. So it's going to set it to 4 terabytes. I'm starting with monthly. That's because if I did it in the other way around, there's a risk that actually my daily limit is more than the weekly limit, which it won't accept. So let's start with monthly. I'm going to execute that, and that's executed successfully, as you can see here. And let's run the select from configurations just to see what the limits are now. And as you can see, we got 1, 1, and 4. And if you wanted to set the weekly and daily, for example, let's say weekly to 3 and daily to 2, we can do that like this as well. And let's set the weekly limit now. Let me run that, and that's successfully executed. And let me try the daily as well. And that's successfully executed as well. And let's have a look at the configurations now. So as you can see, they are set to 2, 3, and 4. So that's how you set the limits in T-SQL. I'm going to put it back to 1, 1, and 2 because we shouldn't have to go over a terabyte for our usage, and we want to know what's going on. So I'm going to just do them here before I forget, so that I'm not incurring additional charges, and you may want to do that as well. Finally, let's save this script for future reference, and we'll put that in a folder as well. So that's all done, and let's publish the changes to our Synapse workspace so the changes are saved. One last thing I wanted to show you is the pricing portal. So in order to get to the pricing portal, type in Azure. Microsoft.com/pricing. And that will take you to this portal where you can look for the pricing of all the Azure services. And if you scroll down, you'll be able to see the categories of the products, and you can search for a product as well. So let's first search for Synapse because that's the one we're interested in. And let's click on Synapse. That will give you the pricing for every Synapse service here. And if you scroll down, you'll be able to see the pricing. So there are a few categories here. Things like Dedicated SQL Pool is right here, but the Serverless SQL Pool is listed under Data Warehousing. So let's go to Data Warehousing, and as you can see here, it's $5 in US dollars. You can look for your own currency here as well. And similarly, you'll be able to see the pricing for all of the other services. For example, Dedicated SQL Pool is listed here, and we'll touch upon that when we come to talk about Dedicated SQL Pool. So that's the end of this session, and I'll see you in the next one.